Hello and welcome to this week's episode of Military Mutterings with me, Jack Fletcher, and my good friend.
Me, Kevin Jansen.
And this week we shall be discussing the G55, the Centaur of the Sky.
Now, I must say, Centaur is a badass name for a plane.
Yes, it is rather excellent, I must say. So let's get into the some of the specifications, shall we? 274 of these aircraft were produced during wartime conditions, and another 75 were built post-war. Entered production in 1943, with its first flight in 1942 from one of the three prototypes, and it retired from Italian service in 1945. This again being the G55. So, on to the first of our aircraft. Kevin, if you would please.
Right. I guess I'll quickly mention the prototypes before this, though. So, pretty much about the prototypes, some sources say they were armed, some sources say they were unarmed. Anyhow, they were just simply the prototypes. And one of the big differences that I've been able to find is that the G55 uses a license-produced DB605 engine called the Fiat RA1050. But I believe the second prototype had just an original DB605, like just one purchase from Germany. It's one of the differences I've been able to find. But here we're going to talk about the Series Zero. So the Series Zero is pretty much the first sort of pre-series, I guess you could call, of the plane. About 16 of these were produced, and the biggest difference is in their armaments. Whereas the regular G55, and we'll get more into this in a bit, I suppose, but the regular one has three 20mm guns and two 50 caliber machine guns. The pre-series has one 20mm gun mounted in the engine, firing through the propeller hub, and four 50 caliber machine guns, also around the engine, but it's kind of an awkward position to put all of your weaponry. And that was also one of the big changes, the big reasons why they changed it to the free 20mm gun layout, because having four 50 caliber machine guns spread around your engine made it very annoying for them to actually get to them and do all the ammunition and whatnot. But I must say, I quite like that as an armament. 120mm, 450 cals, all in the engine. It must have been very easy to aim for the pilot. Come to think of it, because it's
Yes.
all around the front. All of it is in the nose.
In fact, it reminds me a bit of the P-38's armament.
Yeah, honestly, yeah. And I must say, this is a heavy armament for a small plane, if you think about it. Like, at the end of the war, we're sort of used to these heavy gun weaponry for BF-109s and all that stuff. But the Italians were mostly just sticking with, what is it, like 120mm and 250 cals for their C202s. But then
Possibly.
these ones just step it up a notch with a MG151, albeit. I guess I should have mentioned that too. Like oh, actually, now I'm saying that incorrect. So the pre-series here have a Mauser 20mm gun in the nose, but the later ones have MG151s. But yeah, that is a very powerful armament for the plane. But I must say, there's not much else to say here, because changes-wise, there's pretty much armaments, strictly speaking.
Yes, so now we will go on to the next variant, which is the Serie 1. Now, this is your standard production aircraft, and, well, so the main change that occurred is, as Kevin pointed out, in the armament. Rather than a single Mauser 20mm cannon, this thing has not one, not two, but three 20mm MG151s, one mounted in the engine and two more on the wings. And it did retain a pair of the 50 caliber Breda Safat machine guns in the upper engine cowling, and it also, interestingly enough, had provisions for bombs. A pair
I
of
believe
160 kilogram bombs.
I believe drop tanks for fuel were also possible, which is quite interesting if you ask me.
Yes, this is true. And what's also interesting to note is that Egyptian and Syrian aircraft, because this aircraft was exported, I guess you could say.
I suppose more license produced rather than
Yes.
exported?
Used machine guns in the wings instead of cannons. So there's an additional change because this aircraft, believe it or not, was widely used by other nations. And, well, there's not really much else to say about the Serie 1, aside from its already rather impressive armament became far more impressive. In fact, there are, I believe there was also the Serie 2, which was more of your bomber interceptor thing that could, now I don't know if this is either on the German side of things, because Germany did take great interest in this aircraft, but then decided, hang on a minute, we can build a 109 a lot bloody quicker, so we'll stick to that by the end of it. But they did take great interest in it. I mean, someone even wrote, I think Goering himself took interest in it. And there was the G55/2, I believe, and that could be armed with no machine guns, but 5 20mm cannons. Now, if you think about that, and if you think about how BF-109s at this point were still being cannon and machine gun armed when you had this potentially monstrous Italian monofighter coming at you with 5 cannons. That's not even the American single-engine fighters were capable of such firepower at this point. Let's remember that.
That was one of the big reasons Germany had such an interest, is there was a bigger plane, but which still was very maneuverable, let's be honest. Like the Germans, when they tested this compared to the, I believe they put it against the 190 and the BF-109, they deemed the G55 as excellent. Now, that coming from Germany, which their high standards for all their fighter aircraft, now that's saying something.
Yes, now this aircraft has a service ceiling of 41,830 feet, give or take a few, and a maximum speed of 387 miles an hour, which, for you non-imperials, is 623 kilometers an hour, again, give or take a few. So what we're looking at here, again, is still an incredibly impressive fighter. Now, we might as well get on to the last contender, because this already impressive fighter becomes slightly weird, I guess you could say.
only slightly. So this is the G55S. It's well, I'll just give it to you straight. It's a torpedo version of the torpedo carrying version of the G55. Yeah. One thing to note is the weaponry. Now, I've not been able to fully get a clear picture of this, but some sources say it only retained the 3 20mm guns, but other sources say it also still carried the 50 caliber machine guns. But I'm going to be leaning towards just the 320 mils, because carrying a whole torpedo with you as well is quite a lot of extra weight. And I just don't. When you're dedicating yourself to just torpedo duties, I don't really think you'll need the 50 caliber machine guns as well. But I quite like the idea of this, because Italy was using a lot of torpedo bombers to attack Allied shipping and all that stuff.
Yes.
But at this point, they were just using torpedo bombers, large, clumsy aircraft to do the job. Even their heavy bombers, the P-108s, could carry torpedoes, which is very awkward to use against the ship, I'd imagine.
Yes.
So this was an excellent option that turned their brand new G55, which was absolutely excellent, into a torpedo carrying plane that could actually destroy ships as well.
And not only that, but we must remember there were also other nations that used bombers in the sort of torpedo carrying role. I mean, we had the British with the Wellington, we had the Germans with the Heinkel 111 as well, so, you know, again, we also had the Fairy Swordfish.
Did you know that the BV-238 was also planned with torpedoes?
Oh, that's rather interesting. So,
but back to the G55.
Yeah, so I suppose one could argue it's a bit of a, aside from the Japanese, a bit of a rarity to have a fighter. I mean, yes, albeit it is a rather large fighter, but a fighter nonetheless, able to carry a torpedo.
Here's an interesting thought. If Italy was more of a well, a much bigger dominant force in the naval side of things with carriers as well. Do you think they would have turned the G55 into a carrier plane?
Considering Germany had plans to turn one of their E variants of the Bf-109 into carrier-based fighters, I see no reason why the Italians wouldn't do the same with the G55. They'll probably either have a variant that ditches the pair of wing-mounted cannons in order to save weight, or just keep a singular 20mm cannon.
Yeah.
And no machine guns at all, again to save weight, or some other incredible solution to weight issues, because let's be honest, this is a big aircraft.
Oh yeah.
I mean,
Like if
at
introducing
a gross
introducing
weight, we're looking at...
yeah.
We're looking at 7,760 pounds as its gross weight. So this is a beefy fighter.
That is
Remember.
3,500 kilograms for us people on the right side of the pond.
Yes, so again, this is a heavy aircraft. It's a beautiful aircraft. It does the job. And again,
Well, it's the one of the best Italian-built fighter aircraft of the Second World War for a reason.
oh, definitely. Then, of course, you go into other territories like the G56, the G59, but we're only focusing on where it all began, the G55.
And I believe stuff like the G56 was only considered as a prototype. Like, these were built in, well, at least some sort of a large number. What did you say again? 200 and something?
274 wartime and 75 post-war.
Yeah. I consider that quite a good production run.
Yes, you're looking at 349.
Huh.
Not
Well,
of course counting the 3 prototypes.
I think it's about time for us to wrap it up, actually.
Yes, do you have
you
any
have something to
additional
say?
notes? Because
I don't.
No, I don't really have any additional notes aside from just reiterating the point. This is a good aircraft, and I don't think it gets the praise it needs. Because you always
No, it
hear
really
about
doesn't.
Spitfires and Hurricanes and 109s and 190s, but the G55 is just as good as any.
Yeah, it really is.
Yes, and with that, I think that we shall see you all next week, where we shall be discussing, well, one of the many, many ground vehicles or ground pieces of equipment that existed throughout military history, so keep your eyes open on social media for the announcement for that. So, with that, we'll see you all next Friday. Take care.
See ya.